It's cowardly accused in my life. That's what we did publicly. That's what I was I appreciate no, today's just practice. It's my last practice, so. I had set things up. So today was just shooting. So I said, I disagree with that show today. But 62 hours shooting, like just sports comment. You understand the idea of so I was at a since my wife started working for 10 years ago. So there were pressures and situations that stayed into pressures that. How are you doing? Good. They're not sharing contextual information from the time. They're only sharing the narrative that supports that position now. And they're not being straightforward. Also, and so that bothers me when the narrative is used in context around yes, I think I'm saying no, because they'll have that. Right over here. It's in the corner. What's that? No, you're good. Somebody's here, right?
Are we on? All right. 6:59, but a hush has fallen over the crowd, so we'll just go with that. Welcome everyone to this work session. Welcome to the members of the public who are here. We have a brand new sound system that is in tonight, and our installation guys are even hung out later or stayed. They worked hard today, and they're staying to make sure we're not going to mess everything up with whatever buttons we push. So thank you for being here, you guys. And we are not quite set up with like an ideal situation for a work meeting, but that is okay. We're going to share mics around tonight. We have these 3 mics to use. So and it is discussion and questions and things. So if you do have something, don't hesitate to, grab a mic and ask something, or say something, whatever, at any time. But that is just, we got to work with that tonight. So let's start with a roll call. Haley, I can't even see. Are you back there?
Councilmember Gary Anderson.
Here.
Councilmember Mark Cottrell.
Here.
Councilmember David Hill.
Here.
Councilmember Eileen Moss.
Here.
Councilmember Blake Winslow.
Here.
Mayor Jeannie Groberg.
Here.
Commissioner Shelley Bodley.
Here.
Commissioner Scott Justinson.
Good.
Commissioner Heidi Murdoch.
Excused.
Commissioner Justin Wright.
Here.
Chair Kevin Polson.
Excused.
That's all.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, so let me just do a little bit of introduction, a couple of remarks, and get us started. And thank you, first of all, council members, planning commissioners, and staff members who are here tonight, and to our guest, Rob Terry, this fine gentleman sitting here, with a very fine beard. He is someone I contacted. He's correct me if I get the title wrong, statewide land use training director over Luau, Land Use Academy of Utah, and also in the Ombudsman office. Is that correct? So he is, in other words, an expert on planning and general plans and amendments and state laws that apply and all kinds of things such as that. So he's going to help us out with some great foundational information and with any questions that might arise. So he will be a great resource tonight. And we will be starting right off with him in just a moment after I just say 1 or 2 things. So the purpose of this meeting is that we review our general plan, and as you can tell from the displays around the room, especially our moderate income housing plan, and review that together and determine whether Planning Commission will be asked by the council right now to take up the plan, one or both of those plans at this time, and consider changes. And there has perhaps been some impatience and anxiety on the part of some that changes be made to our plan, and that is fine. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion on that question. But regardless of opinions, it's important that we follow good processes, and that helps everyone and helps us keep everything in line and is more effective in working together. So my intention from the beginning has been that, and consistently said we're going to follow a process, and set this date many weeks ago, in part knowing that it would take that much time to see where we are with our budget, because this is also a financial decision. And so we couldn't really do this a lot earlier. We need to know that information plus a lot of other information, and that takes time to do. And so I'm glad that we're here at last, but that is the method and the process that have been guiding us along. And it doesn't make sense to vote first. It makes sense to talk first and then vote. So we'll be voting, council members, I should say, will be voting next week at our regular meeting on this question. And we've heard several hours and pieces of public opinion so far, and we have listened and taken notes. And we may also hear more next week, and emails are always welcome as well. Many people have taken that route, which is good. But tonight's time is set aside for information and discussion among this group here, and from high level down to the weeds. So all these signs around here represent weeds. But Rob is going to help us start off at a high level and get down and understand a foundational, piece before we can dive into all of those details as we hope to get to tonight. And I've worked to reach out to many resources, and Rob and others as well, and pass that information on to Council and Planning Commission in an effort to help provide good information and preparation for this, because there are many factors here and many doors, that might be chosen, many options that might be chosen as a path forward. And so I will welcome Rob Terry and turn the time over to you. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, Mayor. I'd just like to start with saying expert is a very broad term when it comes to me. So I have over 20 years of land use planning experience, and I've had the opportunity to work at almost every level of government except for in Washington, D.C., which I have intentionally avoided and will continue to do so. But have had the chance to be everything from a planning intern all the way up to a city manager at the local level, and then the opportunity to work at regional and state levels of government in both technical and leadership roles there as well. So I avoided politics my entire life, and then, like an idiot, decided to get an MPA. I don't know why I decided to do that. Much like that decision, it was probably like my beard. My wife said that she wanted me to do it, and so I said yes, dear, which is always the correct answer when your wife asks you to do anything. But I appreciate the invitation, the opportunity to be here tonight. I have some slides over here, had provided them just in PDF form. If somebody wouldn't mind maybe taking down the one that's in the middle there, just so everything that's going to be on the slides. Thank you so much. Okay, so as the mayor said, my name is Rob Terry. I serve as the statewide land use training director. I'm housed out of the Office of the Property Rights Ombudsman, but I'm the only non-attorney in the office. Nothing against attorneys in any way, shape, or form. I work with them all day, every day. The attorneys at the Ombudsman's office are terrific, but I am a land use planner by trade and by profession. Next slide, please. Okay, just a little bit of background on what the Office of the Property Rights Ombudsman is for those who aren't aware of it, in particular members of the public. And I think it's always an important, not only resource for them to understand, but most importantly to understand what my role is, what our office's role is, and why someone like me would be here having any type of discussions tonight. So the Office of the Property Rights Ombudsman is a neutral, nonpartisan state agency. And the whole reason why they were put in place was to support local agencies and citizens by providing a suite of assistance, areas of assistance. First and foremost was information and education, and that is the primary function of what my position does, and that is to talk about what state land use law says, how legal processes look when they are attached to any type of land use law. But then as a land use practitioner, they wanted to bring in someone with that background of actual land use and having worked in local agencies and regional agencies with land use, so that there could also then be the discussions about best practices and what processes look like in other areas and what options and opportunities there might be. Most importantly, though, that was to work with each individual agency and to make sure that they understand that good planning is done at the local level by the local agency. And so while there's some great guardrails and frameworks in place and a lot of really good tools out there to help local agencies, ultimately, it is the local agency's responsibility, of course, to plan for their community, for their current and for their future. The other items that the attorneys primarily take care of in our office have to do with being a negotiation liaison between property owners and any government entities, whether that's local, state, Department of Transportation, very common for items when there may be issues of eminent domain. So they will work and ensure that negotiations, mediations, and things of that nature are happening appropriately in line with law, and very importantly, that individual private property owners understand processes and understand what their rights are, because the vast majority of them, of course, do not engage in those type of processes on a very common basis, and so we want to make sure that they understand what the rights and processes are associated with that. One of the most useful things that are used by attorneys are something that are called advisory opinions. And this is very unique to Utah, and to me it celebrates what I have always referred to as the Utah way, which is people trying to look to ways to work together as opposed to just immediately trying to battle each other or go to litigation standpoints or something of that nature, which in other states that I have worked toward, that is very much the reality. Utah tries to be much more collaborative in its approach, and what I mean by that is, as a general rule of thumb across the state, you tend to see that in the way that people operate. An advisory opinion is when you have any type of application or land use issue or something that could very easily go to a legal dispute. And both sides voluntarily can come forward and say, we want to give all information about this land use application, about the issue that we're having here. We want to hand it over to the ombudsman. The ombudsman is then going to take it. The attorneys will take it. They will review all the facts of the case, of the application. They'll compare it to state law, compare it to federal law, to case precedent setting. And then they will say, if this were to go before a land use judge, this is likely the way that the land use judge would rule based upon the facts of the individual case. And the vast majority of the time, that opinion is then able to help both parties say, okay, with that understanding in place, without having to go through a very time-exhaustive and very expensive legal process, the majority of the time people are more willing to say, okay, with that understanding, we feel more comfortable in now mediating to resolution on an item. So really effective tool. But the one thing, especially before we start the presentation here, that I would want everybody to understand is that the Office of the Property Rights Ombudsman is not an enforcement agency. We're not a regulatory agency. We're not a permitting agency. We are simply here to serve, to provide education, to provide training, and to try to help where local agencies are working through processes. So even when we have some discussions today about moderate income housing and things of that nature, the Office of the Property Rights Ombudsman doesn't have anything to do with those processes. But of course, once something does become law, it is our job to understand what the law then says. So when we get questions from agencies about what certain laws are that are land use related, we can help them be able to navigate that within their agency. Next slide. Okay, so planning basics. First and foremost, everything within the state of Utah when it comes to land use planning is going to have its home or its foundational item sitting within the Land Use Development and Management Act. Now, I've been able to say that for a lot of years, but I will say in the last couple of years, there's been some bills that have passed that are not in LUDMA, but are land use related or land use adjacent. But still, the true foundational items of planning, local land use, how it's done at the local level, the regulations behind it are going to be found within the Land Use Development and Management Act. And that was recently recodified. So you will now see that for cities and towns, it's going to be in section 1020 of state code, again, recently recodified. Next. One of the most pivotal items and foundational items, of course, is the general plan, right? The general plan is a mandated document. If you are an incorporated municipality, there is a state requirement found within 1024 of the state code that requires you to have a general plan, and it guides the growth and the development of your community, but it is a visioning document. It sets out those visions and policies for your community, and it is intended to be looking into the future, taking into respect, of course, what you have in place today, but it is more about visioning out into the future. Most commonly, you're going to see those documents have a horizon year of 10 to 20 years out, but there is nothing in state law that says that there has to be a certain amount of time addressed within a general plan. Some communities that are very fast growing, it's not uncommon for them to have maybe 5 or 7 year horizon dates. Some that are slow growing or smaller in nature, and more rural especially, it's not uncommon for them to have 20, 25-year plans that go further out. But again, state law does not say that there has to be a certain amount of years there. That is up to the individual community to set that horizon year for themselves. General plans are intended to be living documents too. So once they are adopted and they're put into place, it should not be looked at as this is now in stone and it cannot be changed. While you certainly want to utilize a general plan as a best practice, as a compass about these are the visions that we have, these are the type of policy directives that we're interested in. If new challenges, opportunities, concerns come up within the community, the general plan can and should be able to be opened and discussed if that community chooses to do so. And to have discussions about, does this vision still make sense for us, or are there any amendments or adjustments that we are interested in making? Next slide. If you choose to do that, 1024 details the process for amending your general plan. Now, I won't, while there's hyperlinks in the presentation, which I will make sure is provided to you so you can go look in that, I don't intend to go and click on all of these hyperlinks here and start going through state code. But I do want to make sure that everybody has the understanding that there is a really good framework that is provided within state code there to help agencies be able to navigate through that process, that talks about number of public hearings, when they need to happen, how public noticing needs to happen, the most critical things that are really, really important. When it gets down to the policy discussions, you will note that for the most part, state law, when it comes to a general plan, is very, very broad and avoids a lot of policy discussion about specifics that local agencies need to do, aside from identifying certain elements and then certain items that have to do mostly with public engagement, public noticing, and ensuring that the public is aware. So that's the reason why I won't go into those items, but know that if you go to that section there is some really good directive, but there's also very good tools, resources, and contacts all throughout the state, including our office and others, that are in place to help agencies as you're going through your process, and you do have some more of those in the weeds type of questions. So if you choose to go through there, please know that. I always recommend for agencies, be mindful and considerate when you go into your general plan to make any changes. Much like jumping into a swimming pool, depending on how you jump in and how big of a splash you might want to make, there's always going to be waves and impacts that are going to end up happening further out there. So do your very best just to simply be mindful about how one change can have an impact in other areas. And then follow that process to avoid pitfalls. And what I mean by the process is ensure that your process as far as public noticing, appropriate public hearings, things of that nature are dialed and very well understood before you get started. It is not uncommon for agencies to get into a process and be so engaged in the specifics of the conversations that they're having, which are vital, absolutely important, and should be happening, but then they inadvertently will overlook a process-related item that unfortunately then legally ends up challenging or sometimes even invalidating all actions that were taken simply because a needed, required step was not taken. Most often you'll see that when it has something to do with public noticing, the amount of time a notice was out, content within a notice, something of that nature. So certainly always an item that you want to be aware of. Next slide. Okay, so moderate income housing. Knowing that, of course, walking into the room, if I wasn't already aware that moderate income housing is a very important item right now on the docket for your agency, it's extremely clear. And so I wanted to make sure that there was some good content about that. Keeping in mind, again, that this is high-level type of stuff that I'm looking to discuss here to ensure that there's understanding of what certain things mean and how certain things work. The policies and the individual items and into the weeds are up to you guys. I'm already bald. I get to leave the room for those discussions. So, but 102403 is where you will find in state code the requirement for specified municipalities, which Fruit Heights is one because of your location within the county that you're in and the population metrics associated with that, to maintain a moderate income housing element. So that element is found, of course, within your general plan. So when it says a moderate income housing element, that is referring to an element or a chapter or section within your general plan. 1021-201 then details the requirements of a moderate income housing plan. And oftentimes those two terms will get used almost interchangeably. Somebody will say the moderate income housing element and moderate income housing plan. They are very closely related, obviously linked there, but the moderate income housing element is that required component within your general plan. And then the moderate income housing plan is the actual policy or implementation plan that is contained within that element, right? So it's almost like someone referring to a room within their house is kind of the way that you could look at that, right? So the moderate income housing plan is the plan housed within your general plan within that element. 1021-202 details the topic of compliance and what constitutes compliance, the regulations that you need to make sure are being met for a plan to then have the opportunity when it's reviewed by the state to say this meets the compliance guidelines. It also then lays out if it doesn't meet those items, what are some of the follow-up activities that the state goes through if something is deemed to be non-compliant. What does that mean? What are some of the things that come along with that? And I've seen already some of the documentation around here that touches on those items. It can be ineligibility for certain types of funding. It can be certain fines that you can end up getting even onto a daily basis, depending on how long the non-compliance may have gone on. But all of those items are found in 1021-202. I won't go through each of those individually because they do really kind of go at a scale, and they are specific to what type of compliance or non-compliance issue you're talking about. But then 1021-3, 1021-4, and 1021-6 detail provisions and tools that support moderate income housing planning. And I'm also going to touch on some other tools that are available that the state has helped to fund that can help local agencies when they're having discussions that I think would be even particularly helpful to a community like Fruit Heights that doesn't have a lot of area to grow into, right? You're primarily built out. And so discussions about redevelopment or things of that nature, I think are much more germane to a community like Fruit Heights than they may be to say Eagle Mountain or something where there's a lot more space surrounding them and they're seeing a lot more annexation activity, infill as opposed to greenfield development. Next slide. And then just a couple notes. There was changes to the moderate income housing sections of state code. They were made this year in the 2026 legislative session. Primarily, you're seeing that from HB 436 and HB 68. So HB 436 created a one-year pause on the moderate income housing reporting. I don't know if you heard it statewide, but as soon as it passed, I could actually hear clapping happening from all throughout the state. I think there was a lot of agencies that were very grateful for that opportunity to kind of let some of the dust settle on a lot of the activities and conversations that they had. But that's where we are right now. But then HB 68 made a significant amount of changes to the organization at the state level of agencies that are directly involved with review of the plans and determining compliance. And so you're actually seeing what was housed in the Department of Workforce Services is now being moved over to what was even still changing when the state law was originally stated. It was the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, or commonly referred to as GOEO. But that now is even being, I don't want to say rebranded, rebranded back to what it was before it was GOEO, which was the Governor's Office of Economic Development, or GOED, is commonly there. So that'll be effective July 1, 2026. Now, the reason why I bring that up is because with that shifting and that changing happening there, everybody should expect to see additional changes when it comes to staff personnel in place, administrative rules that are going to have to do with review process, review timing, things of that nature. So I highly recommend for every agency to reach out to that staff, even though the majority of them are simply moving from one office to another one, but there will be some additional staff and some additional support there. And so reach out and start conversations with the Governor's Office of Economic Development, Housing and Community Development Division in there as soon as possible, because I think that it's going to really help agencies have a very good understanding of any type of changes that you can be expecting coming down the pike, which could absolutely be important to you as you're ongoing in your discussions, what their review process currently looks like, and any anticipated changes that they feel might be there, and then the regulations themselves. Is there anything significant that might be shifting under your feet?
Do I understand correctly the date for that change? I don't know if it's a deadline or a start date is July?
July is when the reorganization would happen. So what was Department of Workforce Services, Housing and Community Development will be moving over to being Housing and Community Development within the Governor's Office of Economic Development. That July 1 will be that effective date.
An effective date. Okay, so
Yeah.
by July 1, sort of they've changed over, and we could call them, and
I mean,
it will
you
be a
can-
go-ahead.
I would even
with
reach
a new
out right now.
director, I think, right?
Yes, but that new director is actually already, the new director for HCD is already in place, right? So that staff transition, I think you're going to see a lot of continuity that's happening there. But of course, the Governor's Office of Economic Development with Housing and Community Development, their executive director level is a brand new placement. Yeah. But it's likely going to be someone who I think has been very engaged in that space in the last couple of years, so is going to be very well versed.
They're downstairs. Oh, okay.
I just thought you guys were appreciating the presentation that much. It was angelic, right?
Playing you off.
Yeah, right. If it gets louder and louder, I'll know. Okay, all right. Next slide, please. Next one, even after that, please. Thank you so much. Okay, so just a couple items that I wanted to touch on here. Again, extremely high level, likely items that are very well understood by the City Council and by the Planning Commission. But these are slides oftentimes end up being very helpful for members of the public that are looking to engage in processes that they may not engage in on a regular basis, or even things like a general plan update, which doesn't happen in many communities a lot, right? So it may be a one and only time that members of the public are going to be engaged with that. And it's important for them to have a comfort level of what the roles and the responsibilities are when you're looking at a city council versus a planning commission, and what does that mean, and how do they overlap with each other, how do they link with each other, who's responsible for what. So first and foremost, your city, your town, or your county council, right, all of those bodies there, they are the legislative bodies for an agency, which means that they are the decision makers. They're the ones that are going to ultimately make the decisions. They're going to adopt the laws and the regulations that are then going to govern the local agency, right? And they do that by taking in feedback from everybody, right? And then weighing out those broad and those competing considerations, and then determining what policy makes sense, they feel makes sense for the community. But overall, most important thing there is the City Council is that ultimate decision-making body. Next slide. So then planning commissions are required by the state. If you are an incorporated municipality, you are required to have a planning commission, but planning commissions operate in an advisory role. So the commission is going to review and make recommendations to the legislative or the decision-making body on items. And yet planning commissions, in particular when it comes to general plans, do play a very large role. Many of the public hearings, the public meeting requirements are actually at the planning commission level when you're going through a general plan or a general plan amendment. So they are very, very engaged, and again, but in an advisory role. So any of the actions that they take are done to then make recommendations when it comes to any type of legislative activity. And before I go to the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about tools. A major important difference between that legislative body, the city or the town council, and then the planning commission in an advisory role is a conversation that we usually spend a lot of time on Land Use 101 talking about. I'll just touch on very lightly tonight, but that is the difference between legislative decision-making and administrative decision-making. Legislative decision-making is what is done by the city and the town council, and as I said, it's weighing out those broad competing policy considerations, right? The most important difference between administrative and legislative is on the legislative side, that body that is making the legislative decisions can and should take into account people's opinions, preferences, feedback, anything of that nature. But then it's completely up to that body how much weight they want to give to that feedback that they have received, right? And then they will move forward with the implementation of a local regulation, a local law, a local policy. Once those items, they've taken action on those items, and you now have your local laws and your regulations, then people that are operating within that set of rules, they are operating in an administrative capacity. And it's only those rules that are put in place with the guardrails of any state or federal laws that may apply as well that can be utilized when they are going through a decision-making process. The most important point to understand there is when you are talking about something administrative and you're looking to take an administrative action to approve or deny, say, a permit or certain application that already has rules and regulations associated with it. Opinions and preferences cannot play into that decision. It is only the rules that are in place at time. And the applicant before you or the project proponent before you at that time, it is you either meet the standards that are in place or you do not meet the standards in place. Whether or not someone likes or dislikes a project or something of that nature cannot play into that decision. Opinions and the preferences are only valid at the legislative level. And I would say in my 20 plus years in local land use planning, the most common frustration from members of the public is a misunderstanding of that oftentimes when they are at most often a planning commission meeting and an administrative item is before the planning commission. The planning commission needs to act in an administrative role, and opinions and preferences cannot play into that process. And oftentimes people, when they misunderstand that, will leave a meeting and say, they didn't listen to me, they don't care what we think, they don't care how we feel. And unfortunately, that is not at all the case. What is the case is those opinions and those preferences can't be taken into account when those type of decisions and discussions are taking place. Okay, next slide. So some tools here for planning and visioning that I think can help, and especially as your agency is moving into discussions about your moderate income housing and within your general plan there. These are some tools that can be extremely helpful. The one I'm going to focus on today is referred to by the Wasatch Choice Vision, which is a partnership between the Wasatch Front Regional Council, the AOG and MPO for this region, and for the Mountain Land Association of Governments, which covers Utah Valley and some of the Wasatch Back. But centers are much more about developing within existing communities, and it's more often looking at areas of either redevelopment or improving existing centers and how they can serve communities better, fit into communities better, and be places that draw in more attention and more of that quality of life and sense of place for individuals within the community. The main website there is that link down at the bottom, but I'm actually going to go to the next page here. And then if you can click on that hyperlink that's right there. This is one of the center types, is referred to as the city center. And this is one that I thought size-wise probably made the most amount of sense for discussions at Fruit Heights. And again, this is not, I'm not a policy advocate in any way, shape, or form. I have no interest in doing that. These are simply tools that I'm trying to make sure that people understand are out there so that they can engage it in their discussions if they would like to, as they're having talks about different types of development within their community. So one of the most useful items that they have on each one of these, there's 7 different overall centers or corridors that show great examples and have a lot of these really useful graphics that can help communicate what type of impact or change you could be looking at when you're talking about the placement or the redevelopment of centers. Scroll down just a little bit more, right there. That one that has, and go down just a touch further, yeah, perfect. So that's kind of centered there. If you take that slider and go back left and right, you can start seeing the difference between existing condition and then a potential redeveloped condition, right? And the point here is that these type of centers can end up introducing additional type of housing options, commercial options, industrial options, anything of that nature that a community may be interested in, and doing it most importantly in areas within your community that are either already developed or are potential for redevelopment, or where there may be interest in any type of redevelopment or additional development in those areas. So as I'd said, there's 7 different ones that you can go through. They range everywhere from small town all the way up to urban center. There's mixed use corridors that they'll talk about, a lot of different things that can be really, really helpful for both elected and appointed officials and staff as well, to have some good visuals as you're then having conversations about, we really like this type of look, or we do not like this type of look or this type of operation. They can then help agencies get to a point where when you can identify the look and the feel, the potential aesthetic of something that you may be interested in, it can then help you have more narrowed or specific discussions policy-wise, right? And then you start getting into those individual weeds there. Okay, if you could go back to the presentation, please. And next slide. When you're going through while that slider I think is great and very, very helpful, there's also a huge collection of graphics that are all interactive here. So this is a static picture, but on the website, as you hover over any of those points there, it will bring out call-outs, and it will give more description on what it's looking at there, whether it's a public space that it's talking about, a mixed-use type of component, a live-work unit, how utilizing things like gentle density, right? We all know that density can absolutely seem like it's a swear word, right? So a lot of strategies there that can talk about how things can be gentle and really fit into a community as opposed to just something being kind of thrust into a community. It allows agencies to have discussions, to set policy framework of how they want something to look within their community before a proposal may even come forward, right? Oftentimes in communities, if you haven't planned and talked about something first, you end up having to be reactionary as opposed to having something good foundational in place and to help you be able to navigate and to ensure that you're going to get the type of projects that your community wants to see, as opposed to then feeling like you're now getting a project that not only did your community not want to see, but is troublesome, right? I'm sure everyone has seen recently in the news in the northern area of the state, a very big item that's happening with something like that right now. And those are the type of things, unfortunately, that can happen when there isn't some proactive discussion about planning and having some good policies and strategies in places that you end up then being in a spot where you have to be reactionary. And more times than not, it's not going to be a positive for the community. Next slide. This is just another graphic that is going to show here some items that are going to focus a little bit more on some of the density, mix of uses, things of that nature. Next slide. Okay, and then the other one that I wanted to share is a toolkit that is through the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget that is extremely helpful. It's referred to as BUILD. It's a blueprint for Utah's infrastructure, land, and development, and it really takes into account a very high level but very inclusive approach to planning. So when the local agency is saying we're interested in having discussions about our general plan or amending our general plan, you can start at the very beginning on getting some great guidance for successful planning and planning strategies and how you go through policy discussions. You can then go to the state plan library, which is going to have plans from all throughout the state to see examples, be able to reference other plans from throughout the state to see if there's items that you think, I really like that, or I'm not so interested in that, or I'd like to avoid this, right? It's some good examples there. Funding resources, of course, a great one-stop shop there. And the funding tool that they have is phenomenal. You can break it down into individual. I'm looking for funding to support infrastructure. I'm looking for funding to support transportation. I'm looking for funding to support economic development. You have all of these bullet points where you can go in and you can either turn them on or turn them off, and it will show you all of the funding that is available, and not just state funding. It pulls in federal funding opportunities as well that are applicable to the state of Utah. And then good data resources. I always recommend for local agencies, when you're going through any of your processes, make sure that you have good data and reasoning behind the decisions that are being made, so that there is good, strong record of that there, that any reasonable citizen could be able to look at that process, and even if they may disagree with how something ultimately was voted on or a decision that was made, that a reasonable person could look at that and say, I can understand why a decision was made. Because here's the data and the metrics behind it. It ends up being very important for agencies to have that, not only for the liability and the protection of that, but for the transparency of it, and for the openness and honesty with the community as you're going through your processes. There is then something new to the state here, which is referred to as the Coordinating Council, and there is a large BUILD Coordinating Council now that has a very broad reach throughout the state. They meet quarterly, and they cover just about every public-private partnership opportunity that you could possibly think of. So whenever anybody is going through their processes and they may have questions or concerns, if it's state law related, if it has something to do with the Housing Builders Association, I mean, you have hundreds of people that are involved in assignments, everybody trying to work together to be more responsive and make sure that people understand the resources and the responsibilities that are out there and how they can help. And then, of course, technical assistance. There is technical assistance there that ranges from everybody from the Utah Department of Transportation all the way down to the Land Use Training Fund, which our office oversees, that can provide technical assistance to your agencies, that can help fund either a staff member from a third-party agency whose job it is to help with technical items. It can help with the acquisition process to bring on a consultant if an agency is interested in doing something of that nature, which can often be very helpful, in particular when you're looking at general plans. Someone who has many years of experience and background there can oftentimes help walk you through the many nuances of that. But yeah, it can cover just about everything that you can imagine there. Okay, next slide. We're almost near the end, guys, I promise. And then this QR code right here will take you to the state's central repository for all things that are land use planning resource related. This is referred to as the Land Use Academy of Utah. So if you ever hear anybody say luau, this is what they are referring to, even though oftentimes when I've heard people say luau, I was hoping that they were actually talking about something with really good food. But in this instance, it's not going to be that. But very good planning resource information that is here. And this is a website that is constantly growing as more resources come on. There is everything from contact databases to definitions, training opportunities, both video, audio, presentations. There's guidebooks, examples of best practices, publications, access to all of the various professional organizations throughout the state and throughout the nation that have any type of touch on land use and land use planning in any way. So an excellent resource, and I would highly recommend that if you have questions about land use planning ever, look here first. There's likely going to be something on the Luau website that can be very, very helpful. Our office does administer this website here, or provide the web maintenance for it. So if you ever have any questions or concerns about it, you can reach out directly to me and I'd be happy to cover that. All right, last slide. This is commonly referred to as our Jeopardy board. And we just get up here, and the reason why I put this one up is because this is just an extremely small, probably 1/100th collection of the type of topics that can come up when you guys are having your policy discussions, whether that's general plan, zoning, wherever it may go. Land use touches every single aspect of our life every single day, right? And so discussions of it, as you can imagine, there is just thousands and thousands and thousands of topical items and very specific issues that are land use adjacent or land use related. The reason why I put this up here, though, is so that people know that all of these items, that there is staff and resources out there that can help with discussions about any of these items. You should always, of course, start with your local agency legal representation, right? Every single agency needs to be able to have that, and that should always be their very first line of reference. But where there's areas where you need help, assistance, or any additional resources that you're hoping to be able to get, know that any of these topics and many, many more can be covered. And part of my job is to ensure that I have the ability and opportunity to connect agencies with those resources as you're going through your individual plans and your processes at the local level. And with that, Mayor, I'll just hand it over for any type of questions or anything. And I know that was a little long. Hopefully it was some good information.
Thank you. Lots of good information. Before we go on, any questions that anyone's wanting to pop in with? And you may at any time, if you want to just go ahead and grab a mic if something comes up. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Maybe, Rob, you can address this. Can you briefly identify the difference between takings and exactions? Yeah, can you briefly address the difference between takings and exactions?
Yeah, they are closely related, right? But a taking is going to be an instance when a sovereign government needs to come in and utilize any type of private property for a public use in general, right? And if it's going to get to that certain point, it's going to be referred to as a taking. And a taking then means that just compensation needs to be given to that property owner, right? And there are very specific regulations and processes that you need to go through when a taking is potentially occurring to ensure that that private property owner is going to be treated appropriately and fairly. Exactions can be a category of taking. It just depends on the specifics of that, and they end up getting very specific within your individual policies and what that is going to be. But the taking is kind of more of your overall, I would say umbrella term for that item, and then the exactions are a form of taking.
Do you mind giving a couple examples to distinguish them?
I would say the most common is when you're going to have something like eminent domain. So an eminent domain is going to be a time where and it doesn't even have to be a government agency, but where a sovereign agency needs to take private property for a public use of some manner. And so the process that they go through there, they then have to make sure that the private property owner has the opportunity for just compensation. And just compensation, of course, in and of itself is a whole, there's a whole bunch of case law and everything that goes along with that one, and what it means and what it doesn't mean as well. But in a broad nature, I think that's probably the most common example that you will see is going to be eminent domain.
What is the public purposes? I mean, maybe I need to clarify. Can you just identify a couple of examples of the public purposes that takings would be used, and then maybe identify a couple of concrete examples of exactions, if that makes sense?
Sure. Yeah, I think the most common that you're going to see is usually going to be a right-of-way. So something for streets, roads, things of that nature. So I think that's going to be the most common that we would all be familiar with and comfortable with there. Exactions then, of course, can end up just being anything that can be associated with a fee that is then tied to any type of appropriate approval, right? So an exaction can end up being like a development impact fee or something of that nature is typically going to be the example I think that most people are going to understand and be comfortable with as well. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, there's some other ones that are, I guess, salient at this point in time, but one of the ones that's I know that's a concern. Sorry. One of the ones I know that exactions. So I think one of the other distinctions, and weigh in if you have a different opinion here, but so takings is some place where the government agency comes in and says, we're going to take this property, and there's a process that goes through that, right? So for example, when Highway 89 was expanded, many property owners adjacent to Highway 89 were notified, hey, we're gonna need your property for this. We can negotiate it beforehand. You can mediate through the Property Rights Ombudsman's office. Yep. You can get a second appraisal at the at the taking agency's expense to do all that process. You're notified well in advance of anything like that. But that's a takings is when you don't voluntarily take any action that would create the takings or create the need. Yep. An exaction, on the other hand, is when you come to the city and say, or whatever entity or whatever, whoever the land use authority is, and say, I would like to do some additional development. Correct. And that's a different process. It's voluntary, right? You don't have to do it, but there are policies in place that the legislative body and their legislative acts that set standards for that. And some forms of exactions can be trails. It can be more a dedication of greater width of right-of-way. It can be dedication of a public utility easement. It can be dedication of property for a new power line. Rocky Mountain Power, Pacific Core, Rocky Mountain Power will condemn. They can do both, but if you're needing power to your property, they will be putting it in an easement, and that is a form of an exaction. Yep. So that they can put in the power and utilities to it. So there are different tools used in different ways. Typically, developers are the ones that are dealing with exactions. And one of the challenges that a lot of people that subdivide their property don't see themselves as developers, but the law treats them the same. Right. Whether it's a 50-acre parcel or it's a 2-acre parcel. Yeah. The law treats them as developers if they're increasing density in their area. And those are policy decisions that, like when somebody builds a new home, they're gonna pay a water impact fee, culinary water, they're gonna pay a sewer impact fee, they're gonna pay, there'll be, power impact fees and things like that. They'll pay with Rocky Mountain Power, things along those nature. And typically everybody expects that. The question is, what if you have a trail that's been on a master trails plan for the city for 30 years? Yep. That's a form of an exaction. And the city has a trail that's on on the master trails plan. It's been there, again, since the early 90s. That was a decision that was made long ago. The council can certainly change that decision. But the question, I've had questions tonight even that's immoral and unethical to have that on there. And I understand that you can generate a lot of emotion because, hey, that's my property. And especially when it's a very nice, beautiful nature trail next to a creek. I get that. I understand that and recognize that it would generate, if that was my property, it would generate some negative emotions too. But what I think is important to understand is these are for public purposes, just like any trail that exists, at some point it was likely, that doesn't mean it can't be changed. I'm just trying to help people understand kind of the basis for this. It's not a moral or an ethical question. It's just exactions have been part of development in Utah as long as Utah's been around. It just is part of it, and whether you want to change that or not, that's a policy decision for the legislative body. But from a staff standpoint, when we have a legislative policy that's in existence, we don't have a choice of whether we follow it or not. So it's not something that staff can change. Anyway, I just wanted to address that one with you here, just because sometimes, having an additional voice that
No, I think
kind of.
I think you explained that all perfectly, and really the main point in those items really does end up being that difference between who is seeking the development, right? And that's where that discussion of the voluntary can come in, and the difference between exaction and taking. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thank you for that discussion. Moving to our next step on the agenda, I'm going to ask our city planner, Jeff Euler, to share with us information on moving into moderate income housing now. Jeff has been our man to do the reporting for us to the state, which has been quite a job for a couple of years, right? And so I'm going to talk about what strategies we have adopted. These are up here. This is, if anyone, hopefully everyone had a chance to read and knows what these strategies are that we have adopted in our plan. What we've reported on is here as well. And we have received some pushback that you're probably going to describe for us, and then what progress we could still make maybe on our chosen items.
Okay, thank you. Rob, thanks for your comments, appreciate that. So what I want to do is I kind of want to just focus on the 2024 reporting. We created the moderate income housing in 2022. Yeah, in 23. So I was charged with getting the city a moderate income housing plan that was state compliant. And that's what we've got. The Planning Commission and Council needs to understand that it wasn't a do this if you feel like it. It was a mandate. We were mandated at the time. We had to do this. So, and I'll go through some of the challenges that we had, but I think the easiest thing to do is just kind of take this, set this up on this chair. Yes. The state. Yes, the state of Utah. Every city, every county in the state had to do this.
That met the requirements.
Yeah.
Not everybody was mandated to do it. Everybody that had a certain threshold or
Yes.
was located in certain counties had
Yeah.
to do it. But Fruit Heights was one of the ones that was mandated.
Correct. So these comments are largely based on, and we're required every year to submit a progress report to the state. And so this is largely what that progress report looked like in 2024. So these are the circumstances that existed in 2024. The city picked 5 The attorney and I worked together on this, and we picked 5 of the categories, hoping that 3 of them would be approved. We had to meet 3. Every city's required to meet at least 3. And that's all we ended up getting approved on was 3 of the 5. So the first one was Strategy A. Fruit Heights has rezoned for densities necessary to facilitate the production of moderate income housing. That's Strategy A. What we said is we have an existing R3 zone that provides up to 10 units per acre, medium and higher density residential. That was our initial statement, is we've already created this ordinance. This is out there, it's available for people to create higher density projects. And then these are the questions that have to be asked, or have to be answered. Describe each action taken to implement the strategy. So this is what we said we were gonna do to implement, to implement this. 1, work with the Planning Commission and the City Council on approving and adopting either a new zoning classification or modifying the existing R3 zone, creating new incentives to allow for higher density. That's what we said in our report that we were going to do. This was the commitment that the city made. Then the next question.
Jeff, can I
Yeah.
interject? You know, Robbie, you're saying that the general plan has to have a MIH element, and then the plan, and then we have this as progress. How do those interconnect with each other?
So
This is not in the general plan, for example, correct?
sure,
This is in the general plan.
It would be, yeah. So the way that it would go is that when they say moderate income housing element, they really just mean like the chapter within the general plan. Then the content that would be found within that element or within that chapter, which I think probably would have been a better term, but element is a planning thing. Then the content within that is, for most agencies, what is then referred to as your actual moderate income housing plan. So that's the content. You could kind of think of the element as like the roof and then everything
So
that's
the
under
5
it.
strategies the city has chosen to follow, that is in the plan, and then these reports are demonstrating that we're following the plan.
Yeah, would then be reporting on.
That's correct.
Yeah, reporting on here's what our plan says, and here's how we're reporting to the state on how we are working to implement what the plan that we adopted and that was approved.
Okay, sorry, thanks.
Can I ask on that? So it sounds like
Okay.
Good. So it sounds like we submitted 5, or that we, to the state, but only 3 of the 5 were approved. Is that correct?
Are required.
So our,
Yeah, only 3 is required. We only submitted 3
Okay.
because we knew the other 2 they weren't qualified, so.
I just wanted to clarify, because I've heard 5 and I've heard 3.
Yeah, let me clarify that. That is a different question. So when Jeff and I and Brandon Green were working on this, we put it together, and we knew that we had this reporting requirement. We didn't know that we would get progress on all 5 of these. We put in 5 and submitted them in the general plan and the moderate income housing plan in order to have some flexibility when it came to reporting. So yes, we only submitted on 3 because we had only had, and I'm going to call it marginal progress, on 3 of those 5. So we didn't have progress on the other. So we didn't attempt to try and say we did anything on those other 2 because it just wasn't true, it wasn't accurate. So we had 5 in the plan so that when it came time for reporting, we could at least say we had done something on at least 3 of those and provide the city with some additional flexibility. Knowing that of those menu options that we could choose from, I think it's in the 10, 21, 202, or 302. There's 28 or 29 different options, something like that. And there's some that have been added. At the time when we did this, there weren't all those options, there were fewer. So that's just to clarify, we selected 5 so that we had flexibility when it came to reporting, because we knew that was going to be an element.
So the question, the next question then is what has been done? What did the city do? Well, we created a new R16 zoning classification that allows up to 6 units per acre. So that was an attempt to say, okay, here's another tool out there by which the city could create some higher density opportunities. And then the next question was, what has become of that? What has become of that effort? Well, we took that new zoning classification, rezoned a piece of property, 0.85 acres, Joe Christensen property, and he was at the time asking for a rezone to this new zone, and that got approved, and this property was rezoned. Okay? So, this is the next question. What barriers were encountered by the city while implementing this strategy? And this was our answer. There was significant public clamor surrounding the effort. Whether or not the area was appropriate for the increased density, after a number of delays and discussions, the city council approved the rezone. It is estimated that new homes in the city on quarter-acre lots start at 1.5 million. These 6 units, which will be sold as individual units, will cost around $500,000 to $750,000. Now, does that meet the affordable housing requirements of the state? No, not even close.
Well,
It depends on the interest rates, doesn't it?
No, not even on the interest rates. I'll get to that. I got a pretty good. The point is that this did not meet the state requirements, but it was an effort.
it was progress.
It was progress.
Yeah, and that's what it requires.
It was progress.
Progress is what's required. It doesn't say you have to meet the moderate income housing standard. That's the goal, but it's going to be very difficult to ever meet that in Fruit Heights unless we have massive vertical buildings or massive subsidies. Yeah.
Now, what's important to know right now is that entire effort failed. Met with a number of developers that wanted to buy the property and do the project, said they can't make it pencil. Can't make it pencil. So our next report on this, which is luckily a year from now, is going to say, that whole effort, all we've done is create a new ordinance, okay? That's where we're at right now. We created a new ordinance. We have nothing to show for it. That's just the facts of where we're at. All right.
Well, and to be candid, Jeff, we wouldn't get to report on that as progress because it was only one city act, right? The council only did one rezone. So there's not an opportunity to come back and say, we can come back and say that, hey, by the way, this is what happened, but that wouldn't count as progress.
No.
Under the old plan. Now, we anticipate the reporting will come back in 2027. 2026, we have a 1-year reprieve from that. But we wouldn't be able to use that, even if that did pencil and they did build them, that didn't grant the city any proof of, or any compliance with progress in moderate income housing if we had to report this year.
Right.
Because that was last year.
Yeah.
So in 2024, so that wouldn't have counted anyway. But we do have the problem that what we reported on didn't work.
The state's under the assumption that we were successful in creating one project. That project has failed. That's all I'm saying. All right, I'm going to try and go through this a little bit quicker. So, strategy E. Fruit Heights City has created and allowed for and reduced regulations related to internal or detached accessory dwelling units in residential zones. That's strategy E, okay? So we created an internal accessory dwelling unit ordinance, an ADU ordinance. Everybody remembers working on that, and we did that, and that was successful, and we put that together, and that's great. That all got approved. Okay, so describe what action was taken to implement the strategy. This is what we said we were going to do. Monitor the number of applications received and approved for accessory apartment dwellings biannually. We reported that the city had registered 5 ADUs in the city since that was adopted. We know there are many ADUs around the city that are being lived in now illegally, and they, for whatever various reasons, haven't been to the city to try and make those legal. I don't know what the number is right now, Darren, but it was 5 and 24. So what has been done? So far, and our answer to that was so far the only land use decision we've been able to make was creating the ordinance. Now this is where it gets interesting. At that time in 2024, the state comes back and says, not good enough. This doesn't cut it. You've got to do more than just create an ordinance. You've got to do other things. And so, you know, we danced around and back and forth and we committed that we would do like a citywide effort, a public information campaign, so to speak, to encourage people to come in and bring their units into compliance. That effort hasn't happened yet, but that's what we committed to do. And so this became a difficult piece back and forth. Strategy A, we didn't have any problems with that, you know. We will have a problem with it next time we go to report on it, but this one, we had all sorts of problems with it. But eventually they approved it. So it was an approved, it was an approved strategy. The final one, before I leave that, again, this is like, okay, what were the barriers encountered with strategy E? The city knows that illegal ADUs exist. Homeowners are very reluctant to disclose any information. There have been a few inquiries about the rules and regulations, but not much movement on new ADU proposals. The city knows that some homeowners are renting out their home with an ADU, renting out their home plus an ADU. So they're renting out the home and an ADU, which is not legal, thus creating problems with neighbors. And then we made this statement: it's very difficult for a small city to have the necessary staff to analyze what is going on citywide. Residents who are knowingly violating city and state laws are not going to turn themselves in you know, come into compliance. There could be a myriad of other reasons. These were just some of the ones that we got feedback on. Strategy F was the third one that we submitted for approval. So this is really where the rubber hits the road with the general plan. Fruit Heights has plans to zone or rezone for higher density or moderate income residential development in commercial or mixed-use zones near major transit investment corridors, commercial centers or employment centers, strategy F. So we submitted that. This is what we said we were going to do. Work with developers to modify infrastructure and lot size requirements, hold a work session with the Planning Commission and City Council to identify density incentives for new development in the city, and 3, create a toolkit and resource guide for developers that included guidance based on work session feedback. So we said this is what we said we were going to do. Now, what has been done? Darren and I worked with the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commissioners remember this. We had a number of meetings where we looked at areas of the city that could be considered for higher density possibilities. the intent was from day one that this wasn't just about the golf course. This was about identifying other and more areas of the city that could be considered for higher density. That was the plan from day one. Only the golf course piece got put in the general plan. The rest of this was still supposed to be in the works and working through it and talking with private property owners and all of these things. And the Planning Commission has identified some areas in the city that could be looked at, and that process is still in the works. So that's what we did.
Jeff, I think it's important you read the bottom of that one, where the state denied the report.
Yeah, yeah.
And talk about having to produce the minutes from all the meetings.
Yeah, so what has been done? So far, there have been a number of work sessions with the Planning Commission to identify areas in the city that would be appropriate for higher density zoning. When the process is finished, the city intends to modify the general plan and identify on a map areas that should be considered for higher density zoning. Again, not just resting on the laurels of what it says about the golf course. We intended to identify more other areas. This is what the state said. The state asked us for the minutes from those meetings to verify the discussion. The state denied our report because the city has not taken action on the strategy. So they fired right back at us and just said, again, you haven't done enough. This doesn't cut it. You've got to go further. You've got to do more. We went around and around and around, and we ended up in Senator Stewart's office. Stuart Adams, thank you. And saying, well, what do you want us to do? We got a lot of limitations. I mean, we're nearly at build out. This was our answer. What barriers have you encountered while implementing this strategy? There are only 35 acres of undeveloped land left in the entire city. There's very limited opportunity to create new density projects. Most established neighborhoods don't see density projects as a benefit to their neighborhood. The goal is to implement a few small-scale, higher-density projects around the city, such as the 6 units being proposed on the 0.85 acres. This is another interesting piece right here. Describe the changes observed or any market responses identified. The city has specifically discussed with a number of developers as to whether they want to consider doing some higher density. In most cases, the answer has been, this is not the right place for that type of development, or the land is too expensive to make that work. We're not running away from any of these challenges. They're all still here today, and they're going to be here tomorrow and next year and the year after that. So eventually, and for all Darren and I know, we might have got approved because a state senator made a phone call and said, just approve this. But we got approved. We have an approved plan.
Report.
Yeah. An approved report, approved progress report. In 25, we essentially said the exact same thing, because we hadn't done anything more or extra. We essentially said the exact same thing. That one got approved without any pushback. I ran these numbers, and I think that this is really important for everybody to understand. This has got to be an overreaching element in consideration of what needs to be done. If whatever we're doing has to lead to moderate income housing, if it doesn't qualify.
Clarify that, Jeff. I think it has to lead to progress. It doesn't have to lead to moderate income housing. And the reason I say that, I'm not trying to interrupt, but we had that meeting, and I cannot remember their names. Todd, was it Anderson, and Paul Moberly, that's right. So they're looking for progress. Now, we don't know what changes the legislature is going to make. Those are some of the risks that we are going to be taking on by opening up the general plan. And I'm not advising not to, or I'm not saying to do it. That's not my call. But we don't know what the legislature is going to do with that next year. We know the legislature has changed the requirements every year, largely in part, or at least in part, because of cities like Fruit Heights, that it's really difficult. The challenges with moderate income housing in Fruit Heights are forces that the legislature nor the city can control. It's the cost of money, the cost of labor, the cost of materials, and the cost of dirt. Those are the major factors that go into the cost of a home, not the city regulation size. I mean, I'm not saying it can't make a difference, but if you have $1.5 million home and you reduce and eliminate impact fees, so now it's $1,450,000, right? You're not getting to get a moderate income housing project here without going huge, massive, and I'm talking 90 units an acre kind of thing. That's the only way you'll ever get that product with the price of dirt in Fruit Heights. And then you're gonna need subsidies to get there, and you're also gonna need deed restrictions and all that stuff were part of these things. So talking with the Department of Workforce Services, and we anticipate, although I don't know that it's been finalized, that they will be moving over to GoEd to oversee this program in the future. We don't know what the legislature is going to do with those requirements. I know the league is involved in trying to temper some of those requirements for cities, especially like Fruit Heights. And when I say the League of Cities and Towns, of which Fruit Heights is a member. But I think the number one thing we need to do, regardless of whatever changes need to be made, the number one thing that needs to happen is, and I think the Planning Commission can help with this, is we need, number one, a kind of a 5-year strategy, to have a moderate income housing reporting compliance. Like, pick whatever strategies they are. We need to pick ones that we can meet and that are straightforward enough that we can report back and be compliant, right? I mean, my advice, and the whole thing of ratifying the previous plan when we admitted that the vote didn't go procedurally as it should have. Nobody's arguing that. My advice to the council and to the city has always been, I don't care what you do as far as opening it or not opening it, but let's make sure we stay compliant. It just doesn't make there's no reason to take on additional risk or to be the one poster child that the legislature uses for taking away zoning authority from cities. And that's a real threat, and it has been, and it's been a threat for 6 or 7 years now. And one of the other things that, I hear, and I do city attorney work in, small rural areas, in urban areas as well. And the one thing I'm hearing that's a constant is, my kids can't afford to live here. My kids can't afford to live here. My kids can't afford to live here. I don't know if that's been heard here, but, I know when I grew up, I live in a nicer house than what I grew up in. My kids aren't going to be able to live in a nicer house right now than what they grew up in. They're just not going to be able to. The delta between starting salaries and acquiring a home in the state of Utah, anywhere along the Wasatch Front or Wasatch Back, almost anywhere, is huge. You're not going to be able to get, I've heard this too. I couldn't afford to buy my house today for what I bought it for, or, I couldn't afford the same house today that I bought in 2020. It's just a different world. And that's the pressures that the legislature is under, and they recognize they can't control the price of dirt, the price of money, the price of labor, and the price of materials, but they sit there, the response universally from legislators is, we can't just do nothing, which is the genesis of the moderate income housing component to the general plans. They're trying to make whatever effort they can, even if it's progress. And so that's the kind of guidance that I think we need to have, whether we keep the golf course in, whether we don't, whether we include Cherry Hill as a place that could be, whether we say that trailer parks are areas for upzoning, or increasing the density is what I mean by upzoning. The one thing, components of this moderate income housing issue is, and it's very clear in the statute, that you don't have, it doesn't say replace, like you can't go in and eliminate moderate income housing. And as we looked at it, we didn't do a deep dive and statistical analysis or anything, but the only place that we could find that might meet the moderate income housing definitions are in the trailer park areas in the city of Fruit Heights. So one of the components is you can't just say, well, you can say that you've increased the density there, but you've got to have more numbers of moderate income housing or more affordable housing than what you had before. So if you're going to eliminate, if somebody's going to redevelop the trailer park, that's okay, it can be done, but it can't be in a way that eliminates those units that are moderate income housing. So you have to preserve existing and add additional. That's what the goal of this is. And again, everybody recognizes that, nobody wants, to have $1.5 million home sitting next to a home on an R16. That's not what they bought into initially, or, I get that, I understand that, but we are put in kind of this box by the legislature of here's where you have to go. And so that's what the next discussion is. Okay, let's figure out what of these strategies the city can feasibly consider as part of that process. Anyway, that's kind of the situation that the city's in. That's the kind of the genesis of the, everybody knows that everybody loves to see, oh man, my house is worth way more than I paid for it 6 years ago, or 3 years ago, or whatever the number is, or 30 years ago. But then you sit there and go, gosh, if I had to go buy that today, I wouldn't be able to. So, anyway.
Thanks, Brad. Go ahead.
Just a couple things I picked up on. So we currently have an approved general plan / report by the state. So our methods have been approved. And if we reopen that, we are subject to new regulations that could be harsher than are currently defined. Is that one thing you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying, and we actually talked about this question with the gentleman from the two gentlemen from Department of Workforce Services. Because we're compliant now, we are still compliant until we're not, right? But we have to, this year we get a reprieve. The only thing we have to do, is report on the number of certificates of occupancy by July 31st. That's all we have to do this year to be compliant. Next year, I don't know exactly what changes are going to happen, but if I were taking, making a prop bet on this and predicting the future, there's going to be changes to this in the 2027 legislative session. So we would need to, and so that's what makes it really hard from right now. I'm not saying don't open it, do open it. I'm saying the process is lengthy. I think the other recommendation that I would have, if the council chooses to redo the general plan and reopen it from scratch, however they want to define it, if you do that, I would say have more engagement than what the state statute requires. There's been no discussion. There was some concerns, and Councilmember Moss raised this, about whether there was, and I haven't looked into this, I just know the concern was raised, when the public hearing happened for the previous general plan, that there may have been not sufficient notice or insufficient notice. I'm not saying there was or wasn't. I didn't actually look at that. But what I do know is that there were many public hearings and open houses, and the Planning Commission that were there and went through that process, they can testify to that. There were lots of opportunities for participating in that. Now, I will also acknowledge that most people don't participate in general plan, even if they got notice. They just don't. The other thing I think is important to recognize as the council is taking this into account is we have a city of nearly 6,000 people. There isn't room to hold 6,000 people in this room. So I think the way that cities are gauging opinion is engaging, and Mayor Groberg is going to talk about this, so maybe I shouldn't steal your thunder, but for a fairly nominal cost, the city can engage a professional polling entity where every home, and you can tell me to shut up if you want, every home in the city can get an opportunity to participate in that poll. And it's not because of the size of the city. If it were a bigger city, it would be much more expensive, but because of the size of Fruit Heights, you have and I believe it's right around $10,000, you can get a poll of every home, mailed notice to every single home to fill out a questionnaire, and there's a question on they have recommendations on when the best time to do it is. Summers are bad to do that, but I think that's critical to get the pulse of the entire city, so that you guys don't just represent one person or two people, you represent the entire city collectively. You guys don't have districts. So that's not, I don't want to say that's unique, but it's not as common as to have districts. So I think it's important for the council to have that information, and I think it's money well spent. When I was a council member, I spent 8 years on a council in Taylorsville City, and that was an annual thing that we did. And it was with Y2 Analytics. And they have, they're very well versed in this scientific process. I value opinion polls, the challenge you get, and council, and what they'll do is they'll come and they'll meet with staff, they'll meet with council members, and they'll get what are the issues that you want to identify and work through and get a pulse of the city on. And that's where your input goes. They don't let you choose the questions and how they're formed, because they don't want to have that biased questions used. They allow the council to weigh in on saying, okay, here's the issues that we would like more information on. And then they will formulate that so that it keeps it as a scientific poll. So those things I think are important to take into consideration.
I have a comment based on what Shelley was saying. When we met with the MIH people, they said that we can change our strategies at any time.
Correct.
But when we do our reporting, we report on the portion of the year that we followed those strategies and our progress on those. And then let's say we choose something completely different. We can do that, but then for the remainder of that year, we report on the progress on those things. So I think that was what we were saying.
Yep. Because the reporting is from, if I remember right, July 1st to, it's on the fiscal year, so the same as our fiscal year, so July 1st to June 30th.
So you're not penalized for changing, we just have
Correct.
to make sure we track.
Right. And
the progress.
based on the denial on the 1 year, and then I guess the prayer that was answered on getting the approval on the other one, that I think it's not a bad idea to look and evaluate every strategy, and I think that was kind of the next step in the meeting.
One more thing. So for those that might say, well, who cares about the state mandate? What if we just decide that we don't want to do it generally? What are going to be the punitive measures that the state takes against us?
So there, right now, I want to be clear, the folks at the Moderate Income Housing Department of Workforce Services kind of reporting group, they acknowledge that nobody had been fined, right? They try to work with you over and over and over again until you get compliance and get your reporting approved.
They did show a chart. I mean, they sent a specific chart with that. I think you have kind of 2 chances.
Yeah.
Like you get rejected, you have 90 days or something, or is it that long? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
To do again.
But they try to work with you during that time to
They'll
get
try to work with
compliance.
you, yeah.
Yeah.
But, and then if you don't, I mean, they won't endlessly work with
Right.
you. But,
There
you
were
got to
some
make it
stragglers,
fit
but
at some point.
Nobody had
Yeah.
been penalized yet, but there is a $250 a day non-compliance fine that you're assessed. There's also some grant opportunities that you miss out on. There was a threat of BNC road funds being a part of that. The Utah League of Cities and Towns defeated that.
He said that's gone.
Yeah,
There was
One-
different transportation.
there was different grant funding and housing transportation grants.
But it's,
Yes, yeah, there was some other stuff that were not available to you.
In our meeting, when we met with them, we asked specifically about A and B road funds, and he said that was not part of it, that it was exactly what was just said. He confirmed that. So sounds like in 2 separate meetings, he said some
Yeah,
things.
BNC road funds were on the table during a legislative session, and the league can be very effective in lobbying those, and depending on the number of engagement they get from elected officials. So that one would be painful if the city were found to be non-compliant. I know that's been going back and forth. Was that in it? Was it not? It was not. It's not in the code right now, but that doesn't mean it can't come back. I mean, what we're seeing over and over again in the legislative sessions is cities are being penalized for, I'm going to say, blown out of proportion situations. I could go into specifics. There's one particular client that I have. There was it's actually 1026, 626. There's an actual specific provision in the code that was adopted over an approval.
This year.
Yeah, this year.
Legislation.
Yep, in legislation. It doesn't mention it, but it has impact on one development in one city. And I know exactly which one it is. I could drive you there. I won't, but I could. And it was over a decision that the council made. And the legislature came in and basically, now there was a family relationship with one of the developers and a legislator. And that legislator got this provision added, and it's that's what I call that is the legislative slap back for failure to comply with what they believe cities should do. Anyway, so my point in sharing that is because I've heard this. Well, the legislature's not going to pay attention to Fruit Heights. Oh, yes, they are. And this city was far smaller than Fruit Heights, less than probably fifth the size of Fruit Heights, and they know about it, and they are any indication of something like this, they will attach onto it and use it against cities, and that's what is challenging. Yeah, that's what's challenging. Cities have been vilified as the enemy in development of moderate income housing, when the real enemy isn't cities, it isn't local councils, it's the cost of dirt, cost of money, cost of labor, and the cost of materials.
Free market system.
That's the issue. And we don't. Neither does the legislature.
All right, so Brad, just one quick addition to what you said. Not only is it $250 a day, but if you don't comply for 1 year, the next year it doubles. Just to add on to what you have said. But here's a question that I have for you. When you started talking, you really kind of implied that opening the general plan puts us at risk. I would like to understand better. I would like you to elaborate and help me understand.
If that's what
Maybe I just
communicated,
interpreted that.
that's not accurate. When you're opening the general plan, it doesn't take away the existing general plan. So you're in compliance with the general plan requirements and the moderate income housing plan. And what I think there should be maybe a two-pronged approach to this. I think we need to get that 5-year moderate income housing reporting plan strategy done first, and that can be through amending the moderate income housing strategies and adding to those. I think that is the number one thing that we need to have the planning commission work on, whether you open the plan or not. I also think if you're going to open the plan, that you have it open, begin work on it, but understand that this is a months-long process, and that as you get into that months-long process, make sure that you know. Have that process continue over the next legislative session, so that when you're getting, and that's going to be in January or March, that you don't get surprised by anything that, oh, we have to go modify it right away. I guess there's options. What I'm trying to prevent is spending twice, right? If you're going to open it, be efficient with taxpayer funds. So, but there's no, if you have an existing compliant plan, if you open it and decide to modify it, you're not at risk. The biggest risk I see is we're going to struggle to report it next year.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
If we do change the strategies, because this is part of the general plan, we'd have to open the plan,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you amend whatever. You can amend the plan. There's opening and redoing the whole plan, and that's one. Or you could just say, oh, okay, we need to amend the plan. Planning Commission, will you please begin working on
An amendment.
an amendment for the moderate income housing plan, or working on that strategy and have discussions and do the work on figuring out what strategies would be best fit for a
So, just to cap off what you said, you're not at risk because the plan that is currently adopted is in place until another plan is actually adopted,
Correct.
right? That's, okay. And that pertains to any part of the plan or to an amendment that it's not changed until it's actually officially
Sure.
moved to adoption.
And I think and again, this is my concern as the attorney of the city, is making sure we stay in compliance.
Right.
Right now, I'm concerned that we won't be able to be in compliance with the reporting in 2027. So if we can actively get that changed, number one priority is, how they have the plan and then the strategies that are adopted in place so that we have kind of a 5-year reporting plan and then outlay that so staff knows, okay, in Q3
Yeah.
of 2026, we need to be, and that's just an example, I'm not saying it has to be, Q3 of 2027, we need to be reviewing or preparing, whatever, I don't know, maybe, let's just say we adopted, we modified, we provide an incentive, that's one of the strategies, incentive to density, a density bonus incentive, that we can have that as a tool in the zoning code. And I'm not suggesting that it has to be one, it's just an example at the top of my head. A bonus density incentive for moderate income housing. Oh, if you're on an R16, but if you put in what deed restricted home, 2 deed restricted homes will give you R15 or something like that, and they can get 1 or 2 extra units if they deed restrict those to be moderate income housing or more affordable housing.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah,
So
just
that's
some examples.
an example, and so we know that the progress is we're going to adopt a new zone, we adopt a new zone, and we are able to report, hey, we adopted a new zone. We're making sure that developers come in, they know what zones we have.
Okay. So, and given changes that, you remarked that changes have occurred every year in these things, but we're expecting, or word is, that there might be some changes and maybe significant ones next year. But this kind of a review meeting, a joint work session like this might need to be a yearly thing as regards our MIH stuff, as those things happen and come down. So just as a note. And before we leave Jeff's section here, the DADUs that are required.
This is the culmination of what I wanted to say. This is the challenge that we're facing as a city. We started to use the words more affordable because we never were going to meet what the state thinks is affordability, and this is why. The Davis County median income is $110,000. You take 80% of that, that's $88,000 a year. That means that somebody making $88,000 has to be able to afford a home in this community to be able to have that count as an affordable housing unit, okay? So you take 30% of 88, that's 2218 a month. That's the nut that's the most that they can pay for housing and be able to meet that requirement. So yes, so so $2218 a month buys you a $225,000 home. That includes principal, interest at 6.5%. This gets back to your question about interest. Interest rate at 6.5%. That's insurance, taxes, and utilities. Okay, $225,000 a month. Okay, we're not going to do that.
$2,200 a month.
$2218 a month is their income. The amount that yes, but $2,200 a month buys you a $225,000 home. Okay, we know nothing's for sale in this city or in this entire county for that. Okay, so now let's just that's the state requirement. We're not going to meet that. That's why we start talking about more affordable. Now let's just take Fruit Heights median income. It's $140,000 instead of the county's median income $110, $140. Can we meet that? 80% of that's $112,000, 30% for housing. You're up to $2814 a month. That buys you a $300,000 home. You can't even buy a lot in this city for $300,000. The dirt's more expensive than that. So we're not gonna meet that. The average median income, or the average median home price in this city right now is $759,000. To afford that home in this city right now, you're paying $6,600 a month. You would have to be incentivizing one homeowner to the tune of $500,000 to get it affordable. We're not going to do anything. I don't care. We're not going to reduce impact fees and give somebody $1,000. They need a $500,000. None of that's going to work. The state's going to have to change the whole way they're looking at it for cities that just can't meet that. Fruit Heights City is the highest median income and the highest median home value in the whole county. All right, so to your point, I don't care if the interest rate's 6%, 5%, 2%. It is not going to make a difference.
But not, it also includes rental units though, right?
Yes, it includes rental units. So let me say a piece about that. So that same $22.18 a month, if you were renting a place for that, then that's okay. That's a qualifying unit. So right now, I was able to find that the average monthly rental rate in Fruit Heights, $1,732 a month, plus utilities, plus rental insurance. You're out around an average of $2,108. That's, $100 less than what. So you could say that a rental unit, we have a reasonable chance about making a rental unit meet those qualifications. Here's the problem. Young families need home ownership, not more rental units. We don't need more places for people to rent. We need to create places for young families to become part of your community and live here and own a home. And that's what's the challenge. That's what's extremely difficult about everything we're talking about, is it's impossible. That's what you're saying. That's what you're saying. So, yes, we could do some things around rentals, but have we helped anybody that needs help at the end of the day? Probably not. Maybe on a short-term basis, not long-term. You need home ownership. That's what the governor and the whole state's talking about now. We need less rentals, more home ownership. This is the challenge we've got. My recommendations are moving forward for the council is, let's identify other areas in the city that could be considered for higher density housing. We create a new exterior ADU ordinance, which we're required to by law now. So let's do that. Let's try and bring existing ADUs into compliance citywide. And then the last thing, let's try and figure out how to get a couple of wins on the ground. Let's try and approve a couple of projects somewhere in the city that are it's higher density. It'd be nice if those were condos, something that people, townhomes, condos, something that they can own. But if they were rentals, it's probably nothing at the big of the day. Something that we can point to as a community and say, here's what we've done. We've made an attempt. Maybe those condos are selling for $600,000-$700,000, but it's better than the $1.5 million single-family home. We've made an effort. All the cities around us are making an effort. Their residents don't want high density in their cities either. Farmington, Kaysville, Layton, Clearfield, they're all doing it. They're all doing it anyway. We could stand to have a couple of wins that we could point to and say, we're trying. We're trying to do something. That's it.
Jeff, I just had a question. Would enacting our a flag lot ordinance again help as far as making lots available? And instead of, last time we kind of felt like we got burned on those, but do more flag lots in as redevelopment, because those are places where infrastructure is more likely already somewhat in place. and trying to do that. Is that something that we could use to make some progress?
I don't know. I mean, we look at a number of things, but here's the problem. I mean, you're talking about one lot. Are they going to give the lot away? Because here we are trying to create something that's
Right.
$200,000. That lot, you're going to have to get much denser than that.
But you
to,
just said we're just trying to show progress.
Yes, we are. But let's try and get something that, I mean, is at least 50% of what that would cost, you know, at market rate. I don't know if you can get there doing that. I think you're going to have to get denser. You're going to have to get denser than one lot. It's going to have to be multiple units attached.
Or we do something, another option, obviously, from looking around the room, is, you know, perhaps we take a portion of the property tax that we collect every year and we make a deal with another city that does have cheaper dirt. And we say, we're gonna spend X number of dollars every year out of the property tax money that we collect, and we're gonna give it to somebody else. And that may be cheaper than trying to do some of these other things that we're doing. It's not pleasant. It's not pleasant to look and say, maybe we need to spend, you know, X number of thousands of dollars to do that. But so many of these other things aren't pleasant either. And that might be cheaper than trying to, you know, waive impact fees or some of those things. That might be something that we ought to consider.
Maybe. I mean, I think we're going to think out of the box and we're going to have to get creative. But listen, things in other cities are not a whole lot cheaper than they are here. I mean,
but that does show progress. It shows that we are trying to put some money where our mouth is. We're not a big enough city to really do a redevelopment agency kind of situation. So that may be one thing that shows progress as we commit to do something like that. And again, that's just kind of a thinking, again, outside the box. Because when you start looking at around the room at the cost of all of these different things, what does work, and maybe that would be something that we could do.
we're hoping, and I think this was Brad's point, that the state is going to get more realistic about what we can do. Because
There's a cost to all of this, right?
Everything, every single thing has a cost.
Yeah, I mean, reducing or waiving impact fees, we can certainly do that. It's not gonna make an impact on
No.
anything, but in order to do that, we have to spend, I guess probably $75,000 in an impact fee study and a impact fee facilities plan that have to be updated that shows what a detached ADU uses. And we can, I mean, I'm not saying don't do that, but I'm saying we have to choose a number of those on that. We're kind of, without some serious attempts at using the strategies we have adopted, we're gonna have to adopt something new to report on given plans.
And that's what I'm saying, so as we look around,
Well, that's what
The
we're
room.
gonna do, is just kind of go through and create a stack of, these are no's, and these are the yeses, and then having whittled that down for the planning commission and for council to then have those policy discussions on,
and
have that.
And maybe, you know, it's 1 year. 1 year we say, I mean, I talked to the MIH people about something as simple as right now in our ADU ordinance, we require, when someone registers for an ADU, we require them to get another black garbage can.
No, that's not part of our ordinance.
It used to be, is it not anymore? But even that, we just say, we give them an incentive. We say, here's your incentive. Maybe if you will register your ADU and be serious about it, we don't even charge you for your garbage service. Just those little tiny things. And they said that is something they would consider. But so you do something like that 1 year. We don't have to stay with the same thing every year. But
Sure, they just have to be, we have to show progress on 3.
right. And
So-
so, but maybe we do something with our ADUs 1 year
Yeah.
to incentivize people to register for more of them.
Yeah,
And then
you
the
have-
next year, maybe we do something different.
Yeah, so then we have, and that's why I kind of have the broader, more than just 3 to choose from, so that it gives us the flexibility in our strategy for compliance.
Mhm.
And then, you can do one thing in ADU. I mean, it's hard to, you can't redo that same thing every
No.
year and get compliance. Right?
But what I'm saying is you start looking around at all the different things, and maybe 1 year it is just trying to do the flag lot kind of thing, because, and that would only be one piece, obviously, but those types of lots have a different amount of, and sometimes they're less desirable lots. I mean, you look at infill and that kind of stuff, and so maybe they would sell for a little cheaper, or maybe people are willing to let, and I know it's difficult to say, but if they would let a child build on their flag lot, and that has happened many times in our community, then those lots are actually going for a lower price because they're letting the child build on it.
Let me take that point just a minute. With Eileen and Jeff is saying, Scott Justison on the Planning Commission, been in the real estate development business for 41 years. Eileen and Jeff both hits on an important point with Fruit Heights. Property is too expensive here. Everybody knows that houses, even for 1.5, most of the new homes are well over that. The only way we're going to be able to redistribute generational wealth is you've got all these families that want their kids to stay here, and the detached ADUs enables these families. You go around all up and down Mountain Road or other places, there's little pocket lots, big lots where there's room to do a detached ADU, and one member of that family can live there. It's going to have to be a redistribution and a way we look at how we pass on our wealth to our kids. Is that they may have to live in that ADU and at some point inherit that house, but there's those pockets that are available, and we can meet some of the criteria by opening up those, and that may or may not be flag lots, separating to be separate lots.
Right.
I think there has to be what Jeff says, there's got to be a place where we can have a little bit higher density. There's a need for that. You look at all the people in this city that retire, there's no retirement housing here.
So
There's places that could handle higher density that would still maintain our quality of life.
one of the things that is a handicap is, quite frankly, federal tax law. Because right now, we have situations where we have, the elderly couple that is living in a house that could perhaps maybe be a little bit more affordable. And quite frankly, they can't sell it until they die, because they don't want to pay the taxes, because their house has appreciated more in value than the $500,000 tax write-off. And that is the case in many places around, because people have lived in this community for so many years. They may have only paid, $40,000 for their house, and if their house is worth $900,000, and that's possible in this community, then they're just going to sit on that house until they die. And I would suggest that that's a problem with federal tax law. And federal tax law, if that would change a little bit, that might be something that would also help, because you start freeing up those homes. And in Fruit Heights, we don't have a ton of that vacant kind of home or rental home where mom and dad have moved to assisted living, and they're just waiting, the kids are just waiting till the parents pass. And so there's a lot of things out there causing a lot of these problems, and we all know that. Most of us didn't move to Fruit Heights for our first home. Most of us lived in a first home somewhere else, not in Fruit Heights, because Fruit Heights has always been a little more expensive. And so I don't know that it's reasonable to say that we need, that housing that's going to be a first home is going to be here.
Unless it's an ADU.
Unless it's an ADU. And I will be very frank with anyone and everyone here. I have a registered internal ADU in my home, and so I don't try. I'm always very clear about that. So if I'm trying to influence any conversation in any way, I just want you to all know I registered my legal ADU in my home.
Duly noted. Rob touched on in his presentation about the vibrancy of a community being in young families, and that is something to consider. It may be true that first homes are not the ones in Fruit Heights always, and yet it is important to make space that young families can live here. It's not great to have an aging and homogenous. You want to have a mixture. You want to have that kind of vibrancy. You want to have kids running around in schools, and we've already had, boundary changes for things happening because kids are growing up and leaving, and then the young families can't move in here. So it's something to think about.
Okay, so just one comment, and I'm going to kind of make a statement, and I want you to either confirm it or battle it. Whatever. I want the truth here. To me, many of these strategies, we need to be careful because they're a one-hit thing. So we get one ADU or one whatever, that's one compliance for 1 year. The next year, we start kind of at zero where we need to do it again or do something again. So we need to pace. We need to make sure that whatever we're thinking, we got to pace ourselves because we can't hit this and take care of it for 50 years. This is going to be an ongoing effort. So it's just like running a marathon race. We can't sprint. We got to start out slow. And so I want some confirmation or acknowledgement or just tell me I'm wrong.
I think you're right. I think that goes along with having that strategy worked on so that we have that minimum 5-year reporting strategy that we can say, okay, here's the strategies that we should adopt or amend our income housing plan, and then make sure that we have that strategy as part of that. I mean, I think that's maybe one of the missing pieces. And again, this was new in 2023, the requirement to put that in. So 2024 was the first reporting year. Am I accurate on that, Jeff?
Yeah.
So 2024 is the first year.
Yeah.
We hadn't been through that process before. Nobody else had. So it was a learning curve for everybody. And at this stage, we know that reporting is not just a rubber stamp. Oh, you filled out the paperwork. We got it. Fruit Heights is good. We looked at the content and we don't like it. You're going to have to put more effort into this, right? That's what we learned in 2025, and in 2024 and 2025 from that process. So yeah, I agree with you, Gary, that we need to be careful, thoughtful, and have multiple strategies, not just 3. That we know that we can say, okay, in 2026 our plan is, or 2027, because that's the next reporting one. We need to have we're planning on reporting on these 3 strategies, and then staff can take those, put out a plan on when we can get that before, if it's land use related ordinances, before the planning commission and then in time in front of the council, so that everybody knows up front, this is our plan. It's one that's adopted and approved by the council, so it's not a surprise for anybody when staff brings it before the council.
And I think one of the things that's interesting to note is not all strategies are land use strategies. Some of them are financial strategies on the part of the city. So the planning commission would enact the land use strategies, but the city council would be reviewing those as well, but also looking at potential other strategies that may be just more dollar related.
Correct.
So I think we need to think about all those things.
Thank you. If there's nothing else on that, of course, just ask any question anytime. But I'm going to move to 2.3 and give Darren a minute. We've touched on this. Brad, thank you for bringing up Y2 analytics information. I was able to obtain, and I also did send that to council previously, the cost for a city survey through Y2 analytics. And your experience was valuable as a council member, so thanks for sharing all of that. Was right around 10,000 for that. Darren and that's 25 to 30 questions and any topics that we'd want to put in there. Darren has costs that he's going to mention really quick, and then we'll get to that, the MIH.
So I took the opportunity and got a hold of a few companies that do general plans for cities and asked for budgeted pricing. They all come back with a full plan, meaning the price for Fruit Heights City would be about $80,000 to do the plan. Some of them talked about if you need to do impact studies for your ADUs or those kind of things, they contract with Zions Bank. And we've gone through impact studies before, just a couple of years ago for that kind of stuff. And they said the average price for Fruit Heights would probably be close to in the 20. In our last study, it was a little bit more than that. But I think already having that study done within the last few years, it's easy to take that information and use it. I wanted to talk, I talked to each one of the companies about our plan. We went through what's going on, changing the whole plan, changing part of the plan. The biggest thing that both companies that really sat down and talked to me about was the public outreach portion. They both said, from everything that they've heard about that's happened in Fruit Heights and what's happening, the public outreach portion would probably be close to $25,000. It would be contacting every home in Fruit Heights City. It would be doing mailers. It would be doing emails. It would be doing just a really blanket citywide outreach program. And then a lot of different public open houses just to get started, to get what the city. That would be part of the 80,000, yeah. And so that's kind of the basis that the information I've got back from the different companies that I sent out and just talked to. And that's what I have. So, yes.
It seemed like when you and I talked about this that there was the option to potentially take one step at a time.
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
So
and I will
if
tell you.
that's what we chose to do.
Yeah, both of the companies that really got back with me, Outpost Planning was one of them, Planning Outpost, and then Hanson's is a company down in Salt Lake that does a lot of different cities, both large, small, and has quite a bit of experience in it. They said the first thing that they would really do is do all the public outreach. They would say, I would go through before you did a lot, is do all your public outreach and get as much information from all your residents and then move forward after that point. And if you did that, once again, they said it would be about $20,000 to $25,000 to go through that process. And they said after you go through that process is when you go back out and say, okay, this is what the community's looking for. This is the direction they expect. Now start looking at your plan and developing a plan and start all your public hearings and start the next process. So, but both of them actually said that would, from everything that they've read, everything they've heard, that's the direction that, as if they came in and actually sat down and did a bid, that's what they would recommend to do. Is let's do this portion, get all the information we can, and then start the general plan process. Because if there's parts of the general plan we can use, is there's those kind of things, that research, that data is good, then we don't have to go out and do that. And so there could be some savings in that, but that was their recommendation. So.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. That's an important part of the conversation as well. Okay, moving to 2.4, we are going to walk through and make a yes and a no pile. Maybe it's a yes/maybe pile of these, and see what our actual. It looks like a lot of options, but how many options is it really for our city if we're going to choose different strategies? So I'm going to actually go grab the placards and bring them over. Do you want to?
For Jeannie, one way may be to let everyone go choose one that's a no to start with and take something out. I don't know.
I mean, some of them say.
Right, so just take them down. Anything that's already a no,
I mean,
take it out.
So let's go through these. So strategy B. Demonstrate investment in the rehabilitation or expansion of infrastructure that facilitates the construction of moderate income housing. So this is an item you need to show direct connection between the infrastructure work and real MIH units being built. It's mentioned on here, sewer, for example, is one of those. But that's often comes up in discussion for us, and where are we at with that? But that's under district control, not under city's control. So other forms of infrastructure. Is this something that we would put in a yes pile or a no pile to consider for a new plan?
Considering the ones we're already in our plan? Because A is
Good point. Yes, we are. I mean, yes, they're already in our plan. We can run through those again.
Mayor, I have a question. Wouldn't it be easier to have a council meeting and assign this to the planning commission? And let
We
them
can-
start this progress, because if we're
We
gonna do
can.
this, we can be here for 5 hours going through
Yeah,
these different
I understand.
strategies.
It's a long process.
Where if we take that opportunity as a council and say, hey, could you guys please go through this and pick your top 10, and we'll bring it back to the council.
That is basically, yeah, I mean, in view of the time, you're probably right, but that is the goal, is to whittle it down, Brad sort of said,
Yeah, but
for
let
planning
the
commission.
Planning commission do that,
Let the planning commission
and
get
then
their
bring it
top
back to
10,
the, yeah,
and maybe
Well-
the council do their top 10.
yeah, and then bring it back in 2 different sessions.
Because, yeah, and then the other thing is when you start by holding up one and you eliminate that one, you know what, as you go through them, you may come back to one and say, you know what?
Sure.
Really, that one is one we ought to consider. So I think to do this tonight is really premature. And to have the planning commission choose their top 10, the city council choose their top 10 would be a lot more efficient.
I'm open to that. I'm open to that. I know it is late and we've had a long meeting, but a good meeting, and I'm really grateful for everybody's input tonight. This has been a really good conversation. We can certainly do that and send those top 10, if we can find 10. That's what comes to my mind.
Well,
But
you may not even find 10,
we've got
but you have
these
your
5.
strategies.
We've got these 5, and if there are others we can find to agree that they might work, then that's fine. Understanding that the one point I think needs to be said, the DADU, external ADU ordinance is required of us this year per the legislature, and yet there's only one strategy item, and it is combined with the ADU one. It's still going to only count under one strategy for us, unfortunately. They're not going to be separate things. Yeah, yeah.
That if we create an external ADU, is that a separate thing, or is that part of the internal
Well,
ADU?
I think it is external, it is different, but I also think that because it's mandated, we may not get credit for it anyway.
Not for, maybe, that might be,
So that's a risk, and I think they may clean that up in the next legislative session, so
it's possible.
it is what
Yeah.
it is.
But we have to do it anyway.
We have to do it anyway.
Yeah, so planning commission needs to work on that anyway.
If it makes everybody feel better, I will say that in the state of California now, you can do up to 4 detached accessory dwelling units on every single family lot.
Well,
So when you're going through a lot of these conversations, keep in mind, like in all honesty, it could be a lot worse.
So,
It is first.
4. Yeah.
So,
You have something?
yeah, so the city council, I believe we're on the agenda to vote whether we're going to open the plan or not. And this has been very helpful having this kind of discussion, but I don't think we're to the point where we can say for sure we have enough information to make that decision right now.
Okay.
Is there additional discussion that we want to have? That, I mean, we're going through the MIH strategies is helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, and I realized from the get-go that this was a lot of material to get through in one meeting, and it is late, and I'm sensitive to that. But this is an important part of it to figure out, are there really good avenues forward or not?
So it seems like potentially the reason behind looking at opening or modifying the general plan would be for compliance to the moderate income housing portion. That's what seems like the focus has been tonight. Is that, just to clarify?
Yeah, so that's the only, having a general plan satisfies that. There's nobody checking what the content of your general plan is at the state. On the moderate income housing, there is somebody checking what the content is of your moderate income housing component. So every year we have to report on 3 of those. We have to report progress on 3 strategies. So again, that's why we mentioned earlier, that's why we chose 5 initially. We had progress on 3 to report at different stages, which we did. Some of them got accepted. We eventually got approved, but it's getting more difficult with the current list of selected strategies to show progress with the state. So that's the critical thing that I see. whether that means changing the general plan or not, I think minimum, the council should, my advice to the council is minimum, have the planning commission start working on their recommendation for a 5-year reporting strategy on the moderate income housing component, and maybe if that means amending it, great. If that means leaving it as is, that's great too. That's the policy discussions that you guys would need to have. But those are the things that I think, just knowing where and having a feel for where the legislature is going to continue with this, I don't see it lightening up. I think we just have to continually show progress, and that's where the challenge is for staff and for small cities that are built out.
Right.
Small and geographic area, beautiful city, but small and geographic area that's mostly built out because it's such a big old place.
Right, very challenging. So David, you're saying you would like more information, you want to have this discussion finished before needing to take a vote? Is that what you're
Yeah,
proposing?
I'm hoping that we can have, I mean, this has been very helpful and targeted, but I think that a broader discussion might be appropriate as well.
Okay, all right,
Well,
okay.
we have to obviously constrain it to somewhat, so.
A broader discussion with this same group
Yes.
together, all of us here, okay? Would other council, sorry, Blake, were you gonna say something before?
No. It's 9:11. Well, not 11. It's 9:09 on that clock. So we're on hour 6:37, 3.5. My brain's gone.
2.5.
I want to make sure that we are going to address not just moderate housing. There's other concerns that individuals in the community have brought up about our general plan.
Mm-hmm.
Those will probably need to happen if we're going to have a vote on Tuesday, correct?
No, I'm hoping that our vote on Tuesday is, I'm hoping that our vote on Tuesday, one of the things we could do is just direct the planning commission to start working on different components of this. And I think that the council, I assume that the planning commission would like some direction as to, because just knowing what's happened in the past, the planning commission would like some direction as to the components of the general plan that the city council would like you to address. And so if I guess one suggestion would be if we say, if our vote on Tuesday, our action on Tuesday is to direct the planning commission to look at, these particular sections. And then I think one of the things the planning commission could make a recommendation on is, are you feeling like we can do that with amendments to the plan, or do we need a rewrite of the plan? And so I think if we could get the planning commission to look and give us a little advice back on whether you think, if we say we want you to look at these things, and you say, yeah, we can do that, and maybe we would recommend doing it as amendments, or maybe we would recommend doing it as a rewrite of the whole plan. And so if we could start with that, help from the planning commission, I think that would be good. Get us going.
Is that something that would require a vote to do? To ask plan to get this ball rolling?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's giving the planning commission, right now the planning commission does not have any action items for them to review or revise, but I think there's a couple of components that I think are important to consider, just as you make this decision, or whatever decisions, and maybe it could be you make them in a series of decisions, that doesn't have to be all at once, right? I think the giving a pulse of the entire city is important. I think that's one. But regardless of feelings in the city, I think you still have this 5-year strategy or reporting strategy that you need help with, right? We need the advice and the recommendations from the planning commission going through that process. So I think that's at minimum you could do that on Tuesday. Yeah.
And that's a requirement though of council to ask planning commission in a vote setting, or is it is it informal or formal?
I think just because of the nature of the public engagement up to this point over the past several months, I think having a formal vote on that would be a good thing.
Okay.
Right? You have that formal vote and it just says, hey, we would like you to look at this and begin the process, recognizing that compliance is important, recognizing, and I want to to just make sure we understand a couple of things. When Rob was talking about, and I'm sorry to digress a little bit, but this legislative and administrative acts, right? I just want to make sure that everybody, especially here, understands a rezone is a legislative act. The legislative body has to, before a rezone could ever happen, and this is specific to the golf course or any other property for that matter, it would have to come before the planning commission first. They'd have to evaluate it. That is an area where public comment is mandated, actually. You have to put out a public notice. Public hearings have to be held. Notices and mailers have to go out to at least every property owner within 600 feet. 300 feet. Is it 300? Okay. I'm thinking one of my other cities up that to 600 feet. But anyway, so what I'm trying to say is there's time to do this. There's nothing in the works for the golf course. The general plan is there, I acknowledge that, but there's no, before any rezone or any attempt to develop the golf course would ever happen, everybody that lives within 300 feet would get a mailer. It would be on every public agenda. The planning commission would have to have a public hearing on it. They would make a recommendation to the council, and the council has absolute authority to deny a rezone. And if a rezone got denied, it would kill any potential development of it anyway. It's public open space. So, and there's no, you can't challenge, you can go to challenge that, but in courts, it is backed up that, and they give, I'm gonna forget the term. They give broad discretion, broad deference to the city council to make those decisions, and they don't have to justify it. Right?
So one of the things, going back to Blake's question about remanding it formally to the planning commission, is by doing so, we somewhat give them the opportunity to spend money to do it, because they're then going to be directing staff to do extra things and then, you know, perhaps getting bids or those kinds of things. And so by asking them to address the things that we want them to address, we are giving them authority to spend some money.
And to Brad's point, the items you just mentioned, Eileen, spending money, yes, those, and the public outreach. If these are substantial changes to the general plan, public outreach is important, as Brad's hit on a couple of times, and Rob certainly hit on too. And that requires some money.
If you don't mind, in support of what Brad said too, Utah is not what is referred to as a general plan compliance state, which means that state law right now does not require your general plan and your zoning to be consistent, right? Now that, again, as we know, that may come down in future years, right? And Utah may become a general plan compliance state. There are other states throughout the West that have elected to go to that, but Utah is not there, which means that while you may have a general plan designation right now where there's a lot of discussion and concern about that, there is nothing that would be holding everyone's feet to the fire on the timing of some type of compliance issue that you would have to have in regards to, because the general plan says this, our zoning would now have to allow it. That is still a legislative act that the local council will get to decide whether or not they want to implement what may be listed within your current general plan.
Thank you. Appreciate you adding that very much. So Blake's question about a vote, what would we vote on?
Right. I want to
Possibly-
just clarify. The reason I brought up what I did was to, I'm looking for a question of scope. So
Okay.
if our vote on Tuesday is only on moderate income housing, which I'm perfectly comfortable with, is that necessary to have a vote and then have another vote to say, hey, we'd actually like you to look at more things? I'm just concerned about whether or not the process is open completely, or if we're asking. I've kind of used this analogy: we're going to the doctor, or we're getting a biopsy, are we having surgery, or are we doing something more than that? And that's
Good
the
question.
question about our vote that will be upcoming.
Good question.
I think that's the policy discussion that you would have on the agenda for the 19th to identify what the scope is, and then and make that decision collectively as a council. And there's, you know, you're in compliance now, so there, and with all due respect to the I guess the last several months, I understand that there is a push to do it. There just isn't a rush to do it. the process is what's important here, and we don't have to come to report this year, so thank goodness, we've already talked about that. So there would be ample notice of anything that was in the works before anything needed to happen. So I think that's a luxury that we have, is to be able to take the time. You don't have to decide the world on the 19th. You can begin the process. You do have a budget. Right now, there's no budget assigned. You can amend the budget anytime, so just make sure that's clear. If you wanted to fund it this fiscal year, you could do that. There's only 45 days left of the fiscal year, so.
So we could start at July 1st.
Yeah, start at July 1st if you did want to fully fund it.
Yeah.
And the easiest way to do that is fully fund it and then make the decision later. You know, if you want to, and that can be on July 1st. I don't care, it doesn't matter to me.
But we do have lots of
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so, yeah, you can set the scope. I mean, if it wanted to be something like, hey, we would love to have your input on a 5-year, and that doesn't necessarily require a formal vote, but I think just recognizing the level of public input and the public interest in this, I think a formal vote would be, you know, important to do. But it could be as simple as, let's get a 5-year, you know, reporting strategy on our Raritan housing plan and get some recommendations and some additional strategies we can adopt to amend. And then if there's trail components that you want to look at the master trail plan. You know, that's not a full-blown opening, redo the general plan, but put that in your budget. Put the Y2 analytics thing in your budget. Those kind of things, and maybe you could amend the budget to get that started sooner, so that July 1st comes, you have 80,000 or whatever. You know, if it's less than that, you fund it. You'll have that information. I think they said, correct me if I'm wrong, it was about a 60-day turnaround from signing the contract to having the results of the Y2 analytics.
Yeah, it's an easy slip to me.
report, and they can let you present that at a council meeting, right? Remember when we were all panicking?
Yeah. Right. That's very triggering.
I got white hair from this.
We may need to consider too, we do have someone in our city that runs a survey firm that has offered to perhaps help for a very, very reduced cost. And so that might be something the council wishes to talk about as well.
So those could be the possible subject of votes probably next week. Thanks for summing that up. Would be funding something that gets started. MIH seems like goes without saying. We need to examine that to see where we can believably make some progress there with strategies, and funding, at least the beginning, is public outreach, I think, is what I'm hearing from all of this. That's step number one anyway, right? So a couple of forms that could take, which could be a Y2 analytics, a general survey, if we want to, interested in a survey that might include, you know, multiple topics, that's a route to take. And the firms that Darren mentioned would be public outreach specifically just toward general plan development or amendment. So those are things for the council to consider and vote on. It would depend what the motion is, that's made when we come to it next week. So we can also put, would council like us to have on the agenda this MIH discussion for next week? Do you want to go through these things and try to sort through? Do you want to do a work meeting for that again, or?
Well, we were talking a little bit about picking our top 10. That might be reasonable to have a discussion like that.
In some forum, yeah, whether at council meeting or to try to have another work meeting about that. We can do it separately. Planning Commission can do, as you suggested, in their meeting, and we can do it in our meeting.
I would like Planning Commission to
That's
do
okay
theirs
too.
and us do ours, and then go back and kind of compare the two and see which ones have buy-in from both bodies. And then again, the Planning Commission perhaps does not have the options that we do as a legislative body as far as some of the financial things. And so what you choose as a Planning Commission may be different a little bit than what the council chooses, just based on the council being in charge of the budget.
I think that she needs to look for a little bit of time frame for both planning commission and city council. So just to repeat what I said I think Mayor Groberg is looking for a time frame on both planning commission and city council, just as to when these decisions of top 10 would take place. And so I think that's something that we need to just quickly discuss. Yeah, and I personally, I'm not sure that that can happen that fast. I think it's maybe a little quick, but I'm only one voice.
But we are asking planning
So,
to get started with that.
yeah,
I think we are asking planning commission to get started with that. They have an
And we-
upcoming meeting.
and we can have that on the agenda for
Yeah, it
next
can be
week.
part of our vote on Tuesday as to what we are going to ask the planning commission to do.
Yeah. So I would say, yeah, we want it on the agenda,
To discuss.
but we probably will not be coming with a top 10 by next Tuesday.
Yeah, no, my thought was I didn't think you guys would have the top 10 by next Tuesday.
No,
It would be-
I don't think so.
It would be just, make that direction and ask the planning commission to begin working on that and
Right.
strategy to go along with it, if they can get that far. And there's a lot of strategies.
Additionally, one thing to consider might be too, as we look at, the top 10, and you do, survey and start looking at what people in the community are interested in, it could change our minds based on what we see from the community too, as far as that goes. It could be that the community is willing to eliminate impact fees for any accessory dwelling unit that is not an internal accessory dwelling unit. I'm just reading one. It could be that might be their thing. And, it may be one that we haven't really thought of, but maybe the community as a whole would be wanting us to look at that. And so I think it's difficult for to choose our top 10 without some more public input.
That's fair. I think we probably all agree public input is step number one. I guess we need to appropriate money
Right.
for a really thorough and professional public input
Yep.
process. And look at what we're getting back from that. That's important. So, see,
Maybe a question. The whole purpose is because we believe with the current 5 strategies, because with the current 3 or 5 strategies, we are not going to be compliant in our 2027 reporting. So that's why we're going to be looking at all these strategies. Yes, correct, yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
And yeah, you can certainly include these as part of the analysis. Yeah, that's not
Yeah,
take
if-
away what's existing.
Theoretically, if we were going to be compliant to 2027 reporting with the current strategies, we would not be having this discussion. Is that fair? If we were going to be compliant with our 2027 reporting, which is the next reporting period, then theoretically, we wouldn't be even looking at, potentially, we wouldn't have the need to open up this discussion again.
And I think that in addition to that, recognizing that you can't use the same act in 2025 for compliance in 2026, that we have to have a plan. These are the 3 that we want to make progress on in 2027. These are the 3 we want to make progress on in 2028. And have that kind of laid out and possible, right? It's even possible on different ones. And so I think one of the things that I learned from the meeting with Paul and Todd was that they're not looking for giant leaps. Neil Armstrong, giant leaps for Fruit Heights. They're looking for baby steps. And I think that's the kind of analysis and kind of thought process we need to have. Progress is compliance. No progress, no compliance. It didn't say how big those steps had to be. I know that Councilmember Moss brought up one about eliminating the garbage can, if that was in an ordinance. And I haven't checked to see if it's in.
Jeff says it's not, it may not be,
It's not
but
in
even to just, you could even give a credit, just whatever you can
Minor
do
things to
to,
make
just
some-
little things.
Yeah, and so those are the things that we need to just take into account, have that plan together, so that number one, staff isn't trying to file this in May,
Yeah.
May and June, and then going, there's no way we can comply with this.
But you're reminding me of some content that Rob helped us out with, which is to be in contact, have discussions with that office. Granted, that office is in change process, you know, so
Yeah, I think
hopefully,
consistency with
yeah.
staff
Well,
that you're going to see to feel comfortable at least getting good directive to help
yeah.
your agency have discussion.
But like vetting ideas such as this idea, like you don't want to just sort of assume that's going to work and wait till the end of the year and then, oh, they're not going to accept that after all. Check that out first and vet through, proactively vet those before you're really counting on them, counting for you in the reporting period. So thanks for shining light on that responsibility of us.
So I do have one more question.
Uh-huh.
As we look at this, I know when we were talking with the MIH people, Jeff feels, I believe what you expressed was you feel like your job is to write the report and it's our job to figure out what should be on the report. And so that being the case, I think that almost needs to be a council assignment to have someone, or maybe you want to just do it, but that to keep that front and center with us every year, what we're doing, so that, because, and maybe it's the person who is working with the planning commission and the council to be that little bit of a nudge to say, we got to get this done, kind of thing. I don't know. I just, so it doesn't get
May I
forgotten.
make a suggestion?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that should be done on a quarterly report,
Mm-hmm.
and that administrative staff should be watching that, and so I'm looking at the city manager. So that on a quarterly basis in the city manager report, right there, he's saying, hey, here's where we're at on our moderate income housing, progress.
Okay.
We've made progress on 2 strategies, but we need, and obviously Jeff will be involved with that if it goes with the planning commission and stuff too,
Okay.
so land use related, but I think that's probably I don't have
I guess what I'm saying is we need something,
We need
something to help
somebody
us remember,
assigned. Yeah,
somebody
I agree with
assigned
that.
to help us remember to
Yes.
tick the box.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There should be a frequent topic, a regular topic, I should
Yeah,
say.
it should be, I think. it should be
Quarterly is probably a good idea.
Yeah.
Nobody's surprised at the end of the year going, great.
Yeah.
What did we do this last year?
Right.
You know, the one other thing that I think is really interesting and perhaps helpful is that we have now that we did not have 2 years ago, and that is to go in and read the MIH strategies of the different cities in Utah. I have spent a considerable amount of time reading those MIH strategies from cities in similar size and not similar size, but they're all available online, and you can read and read. Goodness, it's good. It's good bedtime reading, and look at. But it's amazing what some of the communities are using for MIH strategy, because you can read those and you say, oh, they counted that, and so that might be something that all of us could incorporate into our bedtime reading.
I think that Utah does that really well with sharing resources and having a lot of access to those resources out there.
Mhm.
And to me, the most important point for all of that for local agencies is you don't need to recreate the wheel.
Right.
Right? No matter what it is that you're dealing with, there is some helpful resources out there and some great examples. And some examples of work too of, I don't want to be that at all, right? But there's always good things to look at, they can help.
Well, and that is the advantage to being where we are now versus where we were 2 years ago or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Is that is available to us, and
Yeah, starting
and
cycle,
mhm, and
nobody knows.
and so if you're looking at that, saying that might work.
Yeah.
Is this, okay, there we go. One comment along with that is, I noticed when I went to that website, it was pretty actually easy to find, and it was pretty easy to read the different cities' descriptions of what they did for MIH. How dare I say, maybe the public here can also help, and then they can contact their city council or planning commission to give suggestions. But that's just an idea, because sometimes this seems like these are all like kind of pointing out, maybe these are some hard tasks. We might need to get a little creative.
We probably do need to get creative, but well, that is a whole discussion. So to be clear, council, you want to have on next week's agenda, we're going to vote on, in some form of like starting this process, asking planning commission to look at the MIH plan, and then voting on whatever the first step or whatever you desire to vote to begin, maybe with the public outreach or with, I don't have to specifically put an exact motion on there.
No.
We can have it
I just
discussed
have
out, and
discussion,
you can
general
make a
plan,
motion
and action item, general plan.
and
related.
decide, so consider between now and then, decide what level of, or what type of motion you would want to support in that.
Yep.
Let's see. Is there one more thing? I feel like there was one more thing I was going to say, but, okay. So reach out to me if you, I know. Just being clear on what council, we're not going to have this detailed discussion maybe next week, but we're going to have it on agendas going forward. And possibly wait, the idea was maybe wait till we have done a survey, done a public outreach, hired those things, and had that whole process occur. And then we will get back into these weeds. Okay. I don't know that I need a motion to adjourn, do we, for a work meeting? I think we're adjourned. We're adjourned. Here we go. At 9:34.